Hi. Let me get some water. Whew, welcome to this week's What the Heck, which almost didn't happen, but was saved by
It was a close one.
yeah, let's do. Hey, welcome everybody. Hey, Device X 62 and Bar Talk. Today we've probably got some stuff to talk about, even though Super Booth was too far ago to remember anything that came up.
What happened there?
I don't know. It was just like I don't have any nice words. All right, let's do quick intros. Who are you and what's one module you lust over but will never buy?
All right, I'll get started with that, I guess. Hey everyone, I'm Requiem. I'm in the chat room a lot, so you've probably seen me. One module that I kind of lust over but would never buy would definitely be, I think, the performance mixer.
Okay.
Like, it seems really nice. Would probably be super pleasant to have in the rack, but it's also like $800. So
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'm Hex 7. I do this, I guess, now. And let's see, what's one module? Normally, I have a good answer for this.
it's probably kind of all modules for you right now, right?
I mean, I'll buy stuff eventually, just not like this year. One module I'll never buy that I lust after. Uh, I'm sort of thinking probably. Geez, now I feel bad for even saying that, but probably the nerd sec. Not
Mm.
because it's a bad device or anything.
Hmm.
I think it's actually quite the opposite. In fact, I think it's one of the best sequencers you can get for modular, like, and full stop, because of
Hmm.
all the expanders and cool shit you can do with it. But the this thing sort of solves the desire to do any sort of oh, why can't I remember the name of that?
Like tracking.
Tracking. Yes, it's
Yeah.
solving my tracking needs. It's not
Well, you can probably
exactly,
just
yeah.
like plug that into a mutant brain, right? And you have basically the same thing.
Yeah, I think probably. I don't know. I actually don't know how different the NerdSec is from this, but I suspect it's a little more designed to be used with external instruments because it's like entirely designed to
Mm.
live in a rack with other stuff. Whereas this can work really well with external instruments, but one of the interesting sort of funky things with it is that when you're laying it out, at least in this tracker, every note that I enter will change the pitch and essentially send a note on, but won't necessarily send a note off. So like if you want like 16th notes, you got to like put a like a kill or a note off sort of event
Right.
every step. And that might have changed in a recent update. I'm not sure. I have to do more exploring around that, but that was a limitation before that made it kind of a pain to sequence with a little bit. Does that? For those of you with the nerd sec, let me know if that's how it is. Um,
I actually happen to have a nerd and it is not the defaults. So well, whenever you key in a note, um, you put in a trigger length, and then if you go like to max trigger length, then it turns note on, and you can turn the note off later.
so it sort of comes with a trigger length every time you enter a note, right?
Yeah. So like it
Okay.
starts, you enter a pitch, and then the note length is set to 0 usually, and then so you start raising the trigger length basically. And
Right.
if you
Right.
max it out, then you get note on.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That makes sense. That's not really how the M8 was designed. Maybe again, I need to dig deeper onto that. I mean, I just need to test it out more recently. But that was one of the things I have done with it. It's just a little more, a few more taps, tappy taps.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and yeah, I don't think the two are. I mean, I think the two are different enough. Like this is really designed to be pretty solo, or like with the companion piece that you can pipe in some audio through. It wasn't necessarily made specifically to control external instruments, which is, I think,
Right.
the
Yeah.
difference.
They're both trackers, but they do have a lot of different things going on for them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of modules on that list of mine that I'll just never buy that are always like ones that I'm drooling over. Like Ghost and Performer and
Mm,
probably like Steady State Gate or things like that, where like I think they're really cool modules. I just can't think of a good use for them just yet.
yeah.
Yeah.
The Ghost could be good for your travel case. Like
I
it's a
was I was looking at that. I think that might be a good like sort of end of chain-ish thing or like an aux send or something. So that one's been in and out of that sketch for a while. So that's an interesting thought. I mean, I think the Ghost is a solid module. Totally. Yeah. So that's that. Do I have anything that I actually want to talk about? Ooh, performance mixer. Did you add that to the list or was that there?
yeah, I put that one under there.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty cool, and I'm hoping you can score a less expensive used one eventually because there's a new new version coming
Yeah,
out.
when
The
the
older
two comes
version,
out.
so yeah. Not that the old version is going to be bad by any means.
Right, but it's like the same thing. Like they just announced like the push 3,
Yeah,
like the Ableton push 3, and I've seen 3 or 4 push twos for like $400 already.
Yeah, yeah, they're going like crazy. We can talk about that a little bit, but because I'm very skeptical about the push through right now.
Yeah, I know next to nothing about it. Just the fact that I've seen people offloading the old ones.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you are a push user, period, the push three like is going to be an improvement most likely. So I think that makes sense to see all those. Whereas the performance mixer, like there are some really nice updates to it, but I'm not quite sure it's worth the effort of like selling the old one and getting a new one and finding that extra 2
Right.
HP because it's a little bit wider.
Because it
Um,
doesn't really add anything that like is that game changing, right? Like it adds the bus, I think, like the bus
well,
system.
I would say it adds a lot that's game changing, but no one specific feature. It's more like a lot of the stuff has nice subtleties added. So, like instead of one aux end or two aux end or off in the middle, you can the middle switch is just both. So you can send to both. So you can do a stereo send if you would like, or have your sound parallel processed through who knows how many effects. Um, like the mute switches are pretty nice, and the grouping is like the not the groupings or the yeah the groups. Some of the like performancey features that I probably wouldn't use much of, like if you hit group and like tap a few mutes and like adjust a couple other things, won't take place until you let go. So you can sort of get ready for a drop,
Okay, nice.
flip a few
Yeah,
things, hold that down, and then right as the that end of that fourth quarter note, let go, and completely different feel. So I think there's some game changing stuff on there, but like none of them are like the one feature you absolutely have to have. So um, it's a interesting one. What's up, enthusiastic bandit and Beowulf? How y'all doing? Clee sequencer, yeah. Like, there's a ton of cool stuff out there that I always think is just super cool that I never, I can never think of like how to integrate or justify. Right?
and it's exhausting to try and collect it all. So
Oh my gosh.
I think it's important to like try and limit everything you collect.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I don't like. I still have so much fun just learning the modules. Like one of the reasons I decided to take a year off from Eurorack was just to learn my stuff better, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I'm already learning a lot of cool stuff about the things I already have. Digging more into sound design aspects of specific things, optimizing flows, like sort of gearing it to be as performable as possible. And that's, I think, been pretty fun so far, even though my time has been limited this year. Very limited.
Yeah, I feel that.
Um, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another reason I have the perma patch. It's like,
Mm,
like if I have an hour to play, like, I mean, that's like one patch, right? Like just
right.
patching it, right?
It's nice to just
Um,
have it set up. You turn it on. It's like that 20-second rule that they were talking about a few months ago. You just get everything turned on, start making music, making
yeah.
sounds.
Yeah. And that's necessary for me. Although I was kicking myself because in, uh, in this, well, last month in Unmade, the Modular theme was sort of like decomposing patches or things like that. And I actually took apart Tiny Cosmo and did some rearranging and actually had it on while I was doing it. And it did not even occur to me to hit stream until like the last cable was unplugged. And I was like, oh, there was a lot of good sounds that were happening while I was unplugged. Should have kept that. So um kicking myself for that. But like coming back to the point where how long it takes me to patch, like it took me like an hour just to do one voice like on that thing, and it's not like that big, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's is that just like that's not just running the cables. That's kind of like tuning everything and messing with settings, right?
Yeah, I mean when I'm doing it, I'm doing it somewhat methodically. So on that particular voice, that was the one that took me the longest because that's sort of like the primary voice that I have set up with the most flexibility. Like I'm not messing with the bass voice too much, but the lead voice, I can switch between two different filters pretty quickly using the select. I can run it through a wave folder, like all sorts of cool stuff. Do some FM modulation, but when I was doing that, I was able to really think about the sound design of things. Like, okay, if I'm pulling uh, an uh, an LFO into one of the legions, right? How do I do it in a way that makes it really easy to get vibrato and not like space warble, where you've got too much pitch range going on?
Right.
Stuff like that to make it so that I can crank a knob and it'll give me vibrato, but not like too far. Um,
Right. Like a flanger almost.
yeah,
Too
yeah,
much
right.
vibrato.
Right. And then I have the other Legion going into another of the FM inputs, and I always mix up which one's FM and which one's exponential, which one's linear, and all of that. But it's going into the one that sort of keeps the pitch. I think that's F. I don't remember. Anyway, I have that going into there, so when I want to, I can really like bring that voice into just disgusting sound territory pretty easily. Tuning that, like getting the octave range set and sort of in the middle ish, so that using the octave switches on there, I can quickly go up or down during performance. So that's like just the oscillator bit, and that took a bit
Hmm.
to sort of like finesse and patch up nicely to what I want. Um, yeah, so it did take like an hour just to like do that, get the cables laid
And
in.
is that like the same basic patch you had on it before you tore it down, or is it like completely,
Mm,
or is it
it's
like
it's an iteration on that patch. So this one's actually pretty different. Um, Part of it is I rearranged the modules a bit, but I wasn't happy with, or I wasn't happy with some of the way the last patch worked or how some of the sounds come out, and I couldn't like switch between the filters quickly and easily. I didn't like the LFO range, so I hardly ever used that, or I'd leave it like set. So this one was more of just making it a patch that I could use well, I guess, use all the things that I want in a quick way that doesn't lead to like bad sounds territory, or sounds that I'm unhappy with rather.
right? Yeah, makes sense.
Plenty of
I
bad
need to work
sounds that
on
come out of there.
need to work on that myself.
Um, and because I mean, one of the reasons it took an hour is because I was pretty methodical. So like, let's pay attention to one legion, right, and just go straight to the output. Turn the volume down a little bit so I don't get too droned out, and like just mess with it. Like, feel the different like outputs, what they sound like, things like that. Um, get them set up in Subway. That's another part of this voice is I have a lot of the outputs of that one primary legion going into a Subway, so I can just morph between or mix between waveforms rather more literally quickly, so I can go from a square wave to superstar or something without having to repatch. Get some different vibes there. So I just was very careful about it and was really exploring the sound design aspect of it. What does it sound like when I do this? Should I have two outputs going into the um, MA35 filter, which is sort of the MS10 filter?
Mm.
Or should I instead, what I did instead, actually, what I liked better was taking the output of whichever filter was active, which could be the MA35, and going into the waiver, and then having an output from the Legion sub octave going into the waiver, so I can quickly like just flip up a slider and get that like gnarly unfiltered sub wave going on there that I could do some funky stuff with on Legion. So yeah, that was like some play there. Just like getting it to a spot that I liked that was flexible. Um, Am I going to remember to do all that stuff? Probably not. But I have the option, and it's fun to do. So
Yeah, and you
yeah,
might not use it like in one set or one stream, but then it's there
yeah,
and you'll remember it and you'll flick it and like change the entire sound.
yeah. I mean, I could probably just do a stream with a loop and go through a bunch of that stuff and just bore people to death. But like you can see, there's like a pretty huge range of sound in that one voice. Um, and I think that goes for most voices. You don't need to have like all of that stuff set up like it. Like even my simple bass voice, you can get a huge range just from like panel settings
Mm-hmm.
on on the filters and the sub, and maybe taking an extra output from one of your oscillators and throwing it into the extra filter input, stuff like that. Kind of fun. Um, I also like think about optimization a lot, like when I'm not doing it, like I'm on bike rides or whatever. Like it occurred to me I was using maths to okay, so on the Hapax I can automate CC values and like sort of draw shapes or
Mm-hmm.
sequence that, right? Sequence the CC value. And I had some extra CC values or extra CV outs on one of the uh, mutant brains, and it only outputs 0 to 5 volts. Um, but I was like, it would be cool to sequence panning. So took that output of 0 to 5 volts, and I need it to be bipolar instead of unipolar. Brought it into maths, offset it, took that, used it like a couple of channels to mask to do the whole thing to get it at the right point where it was panning nicely. And not only panning nicely, but I had it cleverly done to where I can attenuate it to like where I put the attenuator back to 0, and then the panning goes back to center. So I can quickly like I can slowly bring in hard panning um, if I want to. And then I was like, the MIA does that. Like that's its whole whole thing is mixing, offsetting. So I like instead of taking up all my math channels, I can like optimize it by going to the MIA, and it's just a couple switches. Anyway, it's that's why it takes me so long to do that patch.
Right. Well, that's because like that one voice is basically like my entire rack,
Yeah,
like of worth of patching. So
yeah,
it makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Um, when I'm messing with other stuff, the subharmonicon and DFAM, which I don't stream hardly at all because usually that's like pretty meditative, and I really don't care if I make bad noises or whatever, and I should. But it also means like most of my stuff is off. I'm
Mm.
just not using it. And on those, when I'm patching, like I don't give a crap. I'm like, let's see what happens here. Like I'm not thinking about it too hard. Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
get weird with it. Yeah. And I think that little box I'm toying with the idea of like I've got to be careful to keep it so that I can make playable music pretty easily, but also I don't want to have a perma patch. So yeah,
So you want to try and do more of like the patch from scratch style,
yeah. I mean, there's times I would obviously like set up a more perma patch. Like if I was
right? Like getting ready for a
traveling,
show or something.
yeah, right. Like I would probably like set that up beforehand, but I would like it to be flexible enough where I don't have to have it set up the same way every time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that particular combination of sequencers, so I'm toying with the idea of Metropolix and Stolper beats. I think
Mm-hmm.
with those, like, I don't have to think too hard.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like I think the Hapax or Hapax kind of lends itself to that perma patching
Yeah,
in a lot of ways,
yeah,
just because it has so much modulation like within it, but like specific, right? So like if you, like you said, automate some MIDI CCs, you're gonna want those to go to like the same thing
yeah,
every time you use it.
yeah. Yeah, because I don't want to map that out in my head. Like, I actually have my drums. This is how crazy I went with this. I have my drums triggers or gates, well, they're gates coming out of the mutant brain, and they're not in order of like the drum pads. They're in the order of which which output is the closest to the module, so the cables can all be as short as possible. So it's
Mm.
like like every time I repatch that, I'm like, I hit the drum pad and I look for which one lights up, and I'm like, okay, it's that one. um, the evil eye sequencer. Okay, first I want to read some comments. Yeah, offset is convenient. That WMD offset module is pretty rad with the CV over the offset. And I have Look Mom No Computer uh, offset attenuate. It's a module that has essentially the same thing where you can do the precision adding and things like that with it. It is totally baffling to me because like when you need to turn the knob, like one of the it's like sort of two sets. One goes one way and one goes the other way, which is like kind of chaotic, but in voltage. Um, but it's pretty cool. The evil eye sequencer, so the one that's right there. Um, it's I don't I don't I don't think so. It's got a CV input. Well, it's got an input for gate reset and a bunch of trigger inputs to sort of, well, a handful of trigger inputs to sort of set things. There's no input for like the slew settings and stuff like that. So I got to answer your question now that I think about it. It does have an input for like changing the direction. So it's kind of fun to take two. It's got trigger outs per step. So when it hits a step, it sends a gate or a trigger out. I totally forget which. But if you combine those with the maths or something or a mixer, you can make it sort of bounce between just like three steps or something. Catch them. It's kind of fun. Um, yeah, that one's a fun little sequencer for sure.
Yeah,
No.
it sounds kind of like the Renee has some of that as well, but it has like one CV in per channel.
Mhm.
You can map it to a few different things, and one of them is you can map it to a pitch offset, so you can kind
Yeah,
of like um, I want to try it with like the clip Diaz and like every couple bars like raise the pitch by
that's
like
a
a
cool
bit.
idea. I mean, Tim MJN open sourced the code, so there's a good chance I could, given I think it's just Arduino on the back, and I'm sure there's a few extra inputs on it. We could probably like add another input to do stuff like that. And it is two channels, but they're sort of, as far as the sequence goes, tied together on this one. But I think that could be separated. No problem. It's a cool sequencer. Like it does everything I want, and it has slew built in, which I love. Um, I guess that's like pretty common with Eurorack stuff, but
I feel like it
still cool to
is
me.
now, but it wasn't always.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Like voltage block. Like voltage block is a pretty close to perfect one. Like I didn't understand the layout at first, but the more I think about how it functions and how it should work and things like that, I'm like, oh, okay, they came to the right solution there. Because I was sort of picturing, one slider per step and then that kind of thing. But this way,
Hmm.
you can sort of perform on two or more of them at a time if you want to, um, while it's recording and playing.
Yeah, that is somewhere where the Renee struggles, is you can kind of only edit one of the channels at a time,
Hmm.
just by the nature of like there's 16 pots for 16 steps. So
Yeah, I mean that's that's normal.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean mine's an 8-step sequencer, but and I suppose I could use a sequential switch to bring it up to 16 steps, right? Like just have so the trigger on the 8 steps switch the switch.
right.
But I think eight's a good number.
Yeah, no, for sure.
um, yeah, yeah. Um, trying to think of what else, like sequencers and mixers. Oh, I finally plopped in the Castor and Pollux too. It arrived, and I
Oh, nice.
was so excited to get
Wait,
that set up.
you bought it?
Well, I'm replacing the old one. That was the loophole in buying the
Oh,
old
okay.
one. Yeah,
Gotcha.
old one. Not going to toss it. I'll probably sell it to somebody cheap.
Yeah.
Um, I
How's the
just
new
like
firmware?
I just like the interface a little better. The new firmware is
Yeah.
really nice, but I need to do a little more reading to get used to it. Uh, it's definitely more performable. It's definitely like got some slick optimizations to the design where like I'd be afraid to touch this knob, the top, the
Hmm.
second oscillator knob ever, because it always would just like the slightest bump and it would take it out of
Right.
tuning this way. And I mess with that settings a lot, but yeah. Um, but yeah, so I really like it. It's got so the second knob by default, if you haven't done anything with it, will be go down in steps rather than fine tune.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So I can mess with that pretty nicely. The other one, which I like better because it's not as noticeable if the other one goes out of tune a little bit, compared to when there's two oscillators that need to be somewhat, in the right range. Um, so if I mess with the left one, they both detune, sort of in a fun, in a smooth detuning method.
Because the right one's following in
Yeah.
like the default mode. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And I need to mess with some of the modes because it can make some rowdy sounds on its own. I was just flipping through them earlier, for a few minutes before this. I think it's going to be a really good update. So good job, Stargirl and the Winter Bloom crew. Really appreciate it. Really looking forward to that left knob being something I can figure. Like I like the right knob at doing what it's doing, but I would like to be able to set that left knob, probably via the web editor, to be octave switch.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I want. Because then I never have to worry about tuning ever
Right.
again.
It's just always. Would you just have it as octaves, or would you have it like
Turned
like a
off or
fifth
something.
off, but like
I would
within
prefer
the switch
octaves
code?
because like if you have like a longer note, not like a necessarily a held note, but a longer tail, and you do the octave,
Hmm.
like if you just like quickly crank it each note, you get this nice like sparkly like well octave arpeggio, I guess. Um, I just really like that sound. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean this one, both of them have the same update potential. Just I
Yeah.
just
The new layout, like the bigger knobs, sounds really nice as well.
Yeah, and it's a more elegant design. I don't know how Stargirl sort of did it, because this one you can see it's three stocked PCBs, including the front
Mhm.
panel, and the other one is just two. Well, I guess it technically is three with that reverse pot, but let's ignore that bit.
And then she did move a bunch of the outputs to like an expander
Mhm, it came with an
as well.
expander. Sorry to get the box, which is actually still in here because I haven't unfurled it. It was pretty cool. So it came with a few things. Stargirl is basically the best at modular, sort of everything. Um, so like it came with this QA receipt
Oh, that's
of
cool.
like the
Everything.
firmware version, pitch data, little charts on there.
Oh, that's helpful because you can really mess that up in the editor.
Yeah, a
At
little
least
Q. Yeah,
like
yeah,
those settings, if you delete them from the module, I know they're kind of gone forever.
yeah, yeah. And then I have the tiny burrito. That's the expander, and I don't feel a need to take that out because I'm not interested in a lot of waveforms from it.
Right. I pretty much just only use the mixed out.
Yeah, for sure. Like if I had another subway, which is not happening because if you buy a subway, you're buying like another 10 cables or something ridiculous. But uh, like this one would be great because you could like sort of swim through the different waveforms. But you can already kind of do that with the mix knob. You can mix between
Yeah,
two. So
I actually got Crucible, I think, in like a trade a little while back
oh
that
yeah,
I have not used at all. And so I was thinking while you were talking about your Subway, I was like, oh, maybe I could do something like that, but with the Crucible. And I think either Castor and Pollux or I just got in. I think the last parts I need to finish the VCO 340,
oh yeah,
which also has a lot of waveform outs. So something like
yeah.
that might be fun.
Definitely.
But
I would love to see you break out the Crucible because that's a module that was the closest to buying a module at Signal Sounds that I came when I was there because I saw the
no,
box and it's like,
oh, the
oh,
boxes.
Crucible,
Yeah.
what's this? This looks kind of evil. And like I looked it up and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is really cool. I better not though.
It is a very like Hex 7 aesthetic to the box. That's for sure.
it's it's a cool.
But like Beowulf was saying in the chat, with I need to update the firmware on my Castor and Pollux, but even with like the current one, I just kind of patched it up and was like, oh, this sounds great, and like haven't messed with it, like just like the basic default settings. Like this is the best voice I've ever heard. This is fine.
Well, yeah, like this one I hadn't updated ever, I don't think. In fact, I really quite liked the original PWM sort of bug.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right?
but you can turn that on in the editor settings. I finally updated this. Um, and I think I had this one's brightness set to nearly 100% because I liked how it would light up all the modules next to it.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
other one is brighter for sure. We have it at like
Oh,
60% or something. Um, yeah.
it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Um, or at least that was my perception of it. I'll have to check a little closer, but I mirrored a couple of the settings, but I haven't had enough time with it to. I mean, they're going to be the same. They're just the controls are a little bit different
Right?
there.
Yeah, the controls are, and I think like I was just thinking, it's all through the web editor,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of makes it a little more awkward to mess with those sorts of settings because like you need to have your laptop or like a computer next to your rack and like get
Yeah,
a cable into it and kind of have.
yeah. I actually like the way the Versio and probably the Legio updates work. Yeah, they're via like a web thingy to change their firmware.
Mhm.
But I don't need to have it plugged into my rack at the same time. Which with this,
Yeah,
I do have to keep it. So I have a really long cable that I made myself to power this, so I can like set this on a table, and it won't be
gotcha.
touching anything metal or dangling or anything. And then I use a
Right.
USB. So yeah, I'm like hovering there with my computer with like a module like floating in the air between it, and it's like really nerve wracking. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah, I liked the pizza updates the same way, where it's
yeah.
like through USB, but doesn't need to be powered externally.
And yeah, with the pizza, it was just like the Winter Bloom updates where I was like, oh, that's a cool update, but I like it. I like it right now, so just gonna leave it in there. Um, yeah, yeah. Much love for Versio, Legio, Pizza, Basil. All these modules that you can turn into different modules are pretty cool. Um, Egon asks, do you have any early plans for Jungle?
That's how I've been saying it too. Yeah. Um, I've been messing with the aim and break packs on the Rample, trying to get something that sounds kind of decent going. But I think I might try and put together my own little sample pack,
Mhm.
um, and then build off that, and then probably bring in some Castor and Pollux kind of pads,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's my plan.
That'll be really nice. Yeah, with that nice oscillator chorus effect. Yeah, or whatever. It can do some cool stuff. Yeah, I mean that's similar to what I was thinking. Although I was actually setting up my Rample with some vocal samples.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Like, well, I was thinking, like just last week actually, I was using the radio music and like using that to like do some weird vocal chopping, and it
Yes.
works pretty well.
Yeah, I snagged some vocals from the Red Means recording server where somebody had left a really nasty comment on a forum like you don't know how to hear, you have to relearn how to hear, you don't know what sound is, you don't enjoy
Oh,
what analog, like this whole rant, like you
right.
have plug-in ears, like there were a bunch of good sentences like that. Oscillator
Hmm.
Sync decided to poetically read this all out. It was like, here you go, CC0, have fun everybody, and I was like, go time.
That's
um,
amazing.
uh, but yeah, I'm actually thinking of using the largely WMD based drum kit over there to make my own uh, amen break. Like I'm not gonna. I don't think I'm gonna use a sample for that, or I'm gonna try not to at least, because I've used M7 so many times I didn't have to think about where it was. Like
Right.
if I had seen your question earlier, I could have answered it way faster. Um, and actually, I have a piece of black tape uh, right there-ish, just going along the top of that like Euro rack sort of adapter, the
Mm-hmm.
rample with all the values I like to use repeatedly written on it.
See, I had
Um,
kind of avoided the M7 because I didn't like the long sample. Like I've been up until now, I've only done like single one shots.
yeah,
So earlier I patched in, I think the gate from the one of the Renee channels into channel one gate, and then the CV into start, and it was just kind of like trying to figure out how to slice it up like that.
yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it. Like I think I can make quite a few drum patterns in a similar vein and bounce between them and not even like my the Hapax likes to has the ability to change to a different pattern at the end of a bar,
Mm-hmm.
or half a bar. But I think the way I'm planning this, I can change literally anywhere I want. So like anywhere on the beat or
Okay,
whatever.
yeah,
And I think it would be pretty fun to play with. Get some nice like silences, breaks, and things in there. Um,
yeah.
and
That's one of the
then
fun
yeah,
things I like about DNB is like the it gets kind of glitchy. It gets kind of weird, and
yes.
so Modular's good at that.
Yeah, and that was the next thing I was thinking of, getting a voice, probably that complicated voice over there, and then a bass voice over from over here. And well, for the voice over there would probably be a pad that I'll set up.
Hmm.
That I'll probably make pretty glitchy with the data bender
Oh,
here and
nice.
there. And then the bass will actually be a pretty standard bass for me, but I'll crank up the attack value so it has that wub sound, like it's got that
Mm,
woo, right? I might even bring in a second envelope generator so the filter is a little bit off from that, so you get like a
right.
more
Yeah.
rowdy,
Love that sound.
yeah. And go from there. Like that's my initial thoughts for like a pretty standard like jungle-y thing. Now that I'm learning about it and listening to it, it feels like if we were gonna do any D&B sort of subgenre, it's a subgenre, right? Or
I,
was it pre D&B? I don't really
they
know.
were kind of like, yeah, you'll find it all out tomorrow in the
Yeah,
Redmi recording video, but they kind of like were side by side. They definitely played off each other.
yeah. Um, I mean, there's a lot of overlap with the breakbeat sort of based thing, um,
Hmm.
as sort of the backbone to the tracks. But jungle, I didn't realize was like it's like almost ambient music with crazy fast drums.
Right. Yeah. And I was also like, now that I've been listening to a lot more of it for Jungle, it's like oh yeah, this was just like every PS1 soundtrack. Like all the
Yeah,
games I played as a kid, I was just listening to Jungle the whole time.
yeah, it was really funny. Like that wasn't news to me because of this. For some reason, that's like all I knew about Jungle because
Right.
like like the Bomberman soundtrack is like
Hmm.
dope. Like it's fucking rad, and
Right.
it has no right to be. Like you're like running. Like it's not that like action packed of a game.
Right. You're just like
Despite
walking
handling
around.
bombs, you're like walking around in like a grid, like setting down a bomb and walking away. Like
Yeah.
it. But it's got a sick soundtrack, like things like that. Like I was blown away because if you just search for jungle, like half, I would say like even more than that, like 80% of the videos and things that come up are talking about video games.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I which was surprising to me, I guess. The number of results on that was surprising to me. I was like, I just want to
Right.
listen to some modern some modern jungle, I guess. And it's either like video games discussions or
Hmm.
playlists with video game jungle tracks, classic jungle tracks, and then like
Right.
one or two like modern DJs. So listening to them. And like there wasn't a lot of difference between the modern stuff and the old stuff really.
Right.
Um, you can hear like slightly better like compression and things like that.
Right. Yeah. A little bit better bit rate on the samples.
Sure.
You've got to look up. There was a subgenre I found called, I think, neurofunk, like neuro, like brain,
Mhm.
and that one's really fun. I like that one a lot. It's got the same like DMB drums to it, but the sounds get a lot more experimental, I would say.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean that's. I think I may try, depending on how much time this month I have to dedicate. I may try doing more than one Modular, and
Hmm.
but the first one's going to be. I think I'm going to go for like a pretty typical sort of jungle track with a hex 7, whatever spin because of the sounds I like. But I think I could get real weird with it after that. Like the next one can be whatever I feel like with some
Oh yeah,
like
definitely.
break beats. um, or not. Yeah, I don't know. Um, like I'm trying to think of like what is like one of the interesting things about listening to these break beats is listening to. I was listening for the range the sounds were in, and actually most of the drums outside of the modern ones tended to be pretty like mid to high range.
Hmm.
And then there was often either a melody or like like a slower sub, like a bass line somewhere that was pretty far apart as far as the spectrum goes,
Hmm.
which leaves a lot of room for drops and stuff like that. It was pretty cool to think
Yeah,
about that.
I
Like
think
even the
that's
kicks were like pretty high range.
well, it's because they took like 90, 100 BPM songs and
Yeah,
had to pitch speed them up to 170 or so.
yeah, 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 and yeah, it was pretty cool to think about like that. So I was thinking, like, if I had a wall of well, if I had a wall of Eurorack,
Wait a second.
like like, like the Dead Mouse guy has the wall or whatever, it might be
Hmm.
fun to make like a DNB or jungle drum kit that's all synthesized drums and like all kind of weird ones too,
Right.
um, like mutant drum kind of stuff.
Hmm. Well, you could probably. So I think the way like the data bender works is you could like mix all of your drums and then like run them all into the buffer, right? And then kind of get a little crazy with them there.
Yeah, you can make a drum kit where, and this is what I'm doing with the vocal samples, but you can make a drum kit where I can say like I want these 12 samples to be the first drum, and these 6 to be the second drum, and this one sample to be the third one, and these 8 to be the fourth drum, right? And by default it will cycle through those. So every time I hit that one drum, it'll go through, it'll randomly pick one of the 12 samples. You can
Oh, that's on the
do it,
ramble, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
on the rample, and then you can set it to cycle, or you can so it'll cycle through in a linear fashion, or you can set it to well, you can set it to manual where you select one sample, it only plays the
right.
one sample. And then the one that I'm actually kind of interested in, sort of, is you can select a sample via velocity. So I can change the velocity to sort of pick the
Oh,
specific samples. And
it sounds like some MIDI shenanigans.
yeah, I mean, it would be fun to do, I think, for one track, but I think the problem I have with it is like I probably wouldn't want to use that kit very often. If it's a vocal
Mm,
samples, like that's fine because
right.
I'm probably not going to use them too much. But yeah, so that's the thing I like the most about the Rample is I can dump a bunch of kicks into a folder. It all be in one lane. I could cycle through.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good way to like easily vary your patterns. Like
Yeah,
you literally don't have to do anything. You just put a bunch of kicks in a folder, put a bunch of snares in a folder, and like set it to random, and it'll
yeah,
take care of it for you, basically.
yeah. You hear that?
I hear something. Yeah.
Cool. Um, I just hear my partner growling at my dog
That's what that was.
and laughing. Yeah, I totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on Jingle. I was surprised that it got picked because I was just reading through the list and um, somebody made a jungle pun. I thought it was cool. Um, and just put them all up there. I was really looking forward to like detune like
Yeah.
detuning it
They
and a few
they
of the other ones, but
they all sounded really fun. Like
yeah,
the June bug sounded like it'd be good too, but I had been kind of wanting to try making D&B on modular anyways, and so
yeah,
maybe this will be the inspiration.
yeah. Like some of the folks that I've streamed and like chatted with, like they're DJs and they play a lot of DNB, so they're always trying to get me to make DNB, and
Uh,
I I have like a couple of things that are sort of DNB ish, but I don't. I get the problem is I get bored too quickly, and if you stream
right.
an hour of DMB, like that's just too much of like
Yeah,
over and over
absolutely.
again. Like,
Thinking like a
yeah,
15-minute stream for my monthler.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's actually something I'm really interested to see on this one. Because like if we do an ambient or ARP or whatever, like people can stream for an hour pretty easily and have a good time. When you're at 160 or ish BPM, like I
Right.
think they're going to be shorter streams. Because like everything I write will last like 3 minutes, and then I'll be repeating myself. Like,
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of like I've run into that issue a lot with streaming. Is like I think I write a lot of things that would work pretty good as tracks, and then like try and stretch that out for 30 minutes.
yes, yeah, and I have like two different kinds of streams too. Like when I'm streaming for EMS, like yeah, I'm cool having 3 minutes of content and stretching it out to an hour because I can play around with the sounds and like hang out and chat and all of that. But when I'm streaming on like just like my Twitch or something where folks come in that like aren't really interested in you know repetitive
Like
modular for an hour,
right.
I'm like, all right, I gotta switch it up.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I really like about the Hey Pack specifically, right? It's like the project loading.
Yeah.
Um, the NerdSeek has projects you can load and save, but it like stops the playback. So I need to figure out like something to get around that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few ways to do it. One is like if you have a long delay and with something
Mm,
that's like a delayed drum kicker or something like that, so you get like a few seconds, crank it up, hold the FSU button, whatever the thing is, to like get a
right.
few seconds of noise while it loads. um, I really like this is one of the things where when I was looking at Eurorack, I'm still unhappy with every single envelope out there. Because like some of them have the features I want, which are I just want an ADSR. I would like a overall time knob. I don't like the switches as much; those are acceptable, but the time knob is a little better for sort of fine tuning the distance. Because like the WMD Javelin, which has the switch, goes from like ultra short to like pretty good mid to like like a 2 minute decay or something like crazy. Like
Right.
it's such a wide range with three little itty bitty clicks. And the thing that makes transitions nice is a switch to just turn the envelope on, like as if it's being held
Oh,
down.
right, like a
And
loop kind of thing,
it's not
or
even
like
a
a
loop.
sustain.
It's more like a sustain, yeah. So what it is like a lot of oscillators will have. I mean, not oscillators. Envelopes will have the button to sort of trigger it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, on the Cosmo envelope generators, they have a an on off momentary on switch, so I can flick the momentary on when I want to test stuff or like add a few extra notes, but I can also just flip it up to keep it on, which is really handy for transition. So I might like end on a note, hit that, load up a thing, and then start in with some side chaining or something, right? Like once that next project is loaded, and then I can turn it off once. So you can. That's those are a few things I do. Like I'm looking for ways to make noise. Like that's one of the reasons I have the Airman Loopman sort of tape thing is to like add some filler while I was transitioning on a pyramid. You know.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was kind of thinking on a similar way with like the Maestro, because it can, if you aren't triggering it, it just loops to the clock, and so maybe like um, unplug the trigger to a voice while it's loading the project and let it just
Yes.
trigger some sounds.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep it going. I mean, you can also just stop it. I think if you have a microphone and you're comfortable, like talking or yelling into a
Mm,
microphone of any kind, um, that's another way. Like you can end sort of dramatically. Say the only
right,
thing DJs know how to say, "What's up? What's up, Denver?"
right, yeah,
um, and in that time, you can quickly flick, load up the next song.
yeah.
Um,
We got a question in the chat.
how do I sidechain? Um, Converted envelope to VCA, regular envelope to a compressor, or something else? Good question. I've done all three with Cosmos stuff specifically. In Eurorackland, it's easy because I have a dedicated, either MSCL, the muscle, WMD muscle, and pretty much use that to sidechain the bass and optionally a lead. Uh, the because it's stereo, I use it for both, I guess, and I just have the lead split up. This is part of why that it's just kind of a complicated routing. So I have it split up so I can send it through the sidechain or bypass the sidechain if I don't want it. But for Cosmo, what I end up doing, I did use the VCA, inverted envelope to a VCA, and it was kind of I had sort of trouble dialing in at the time because I didn't have a lot of modules. I didn't have attenuators for that kind of a thing. Um, and I once I grew a little bit and started building some other folks modules, I did have an extra like tiny uh, equivalent of a 2 HP, but for Cosmo is 2.5 centimeters wide. And I got an attack release envelope generator, and that was pretty perfect for using as the CV4 side chain. And I would invert that signal for just that purpose. But once I got Tiny Cosmos sort of setup, I was thinking about reducing setup times for shows and stuff. I ended up getting the Cockpit 2 for Cosmo and routing that straight over into the performance mixer. And the Cockpit 2 has a sidechain input, which, in my opinion, needs to like work on its uh, I'm totally
Like the depth or
the
like
curve.
the
Yeah, the
mm.
curve of the sidechain knob goes from
Oh, it's
like
like little
0 to full
bit.
sidechain in like a millimeter or 2, no matter what signal you put in, audio, CV, and you can change the settings for those, independently. It does have settings, like a way to change between like, CV input or, audio input, etc. And, both of them are pretty sensitive. So that's not perfect, but it does allow me the flexibility to, if I hold down one of the, encoders, because it uses rotary encoders for the different levels. If I hold down on one on the channel, it'll switch it to have side chaining, or I can disable side chaining because sometimes you don't want it on everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not perfect, but that's typically what I do. And I also went from using separate, envelope generators to get that sidechain curve to, instead use the, um, audio from the kick, the primary kick, which isn't
Also,
perfect, but it, yeah.
you use the wave, like the audio waveform.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Because both the muscle and the, uh, cockpit 2 accept audio inputs and have sort of an envelope, an internal, they each
Oh,
have their
okay.
internal envelope follower, and that makes it
Okay.
really
Nice.
nice for me to change the, when I change the depth of the kick, so like the length of it. What
Hmm.
am I thinking of? The decay of the kick. It
Gotcha.
also affects those. And the WMD one is a little better because like, compressor is a little better because I can adjust the tail on that a little more to get that nice pulsing feeling. Um, yeah. Anyway, that's how I do those. Um, Not great solutions, I think. Like the Temp Legio and the Ultra Kick and stuff like that are pretty amazing because they have an audio input for you to sidechain.
Hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I need to try that more. I've mostly used the Ghost has a trigger input for side chaining. Um, so I use that for like my main voice.
The
Um,
Ghost is amazing. Like it really, it really is an incredible module. Um,
it's so good for like, it's really good for tying one voice together. Like
yes.
I tried running some like multiple voices through it, and it didn't quite work as well for me.
Yeah, I
Um,
was wondering how it'd work end of chain because it's got a few effects, and every once in a while, when I want to be, a shitty sound engineer, I'll use my
there
mixer's built-in effects, like
you
talk
go.
about end of
Yeah.
chain, right? To sort of add mud, like ramp up the mud with delay or reverb
Hmm.
or whatever, and then right when I'm doing a drop, I'll immediately cut that off. And I think does the Ghost have a DJ style filter? I'm trying to remember if it does or
It
not.
does. Yeah.
So that would be also really helpful end of chain in a live scenario, so you can like, hey everybody, how are you doing, Denver?
Mm.
And then turn it back on. Like,
No matter what city you're in, just
it's
ask how
always
Denver's
Denver.
doing.
I only play in Denver's. There's a few of them. Um,
It'd be a fun shtick. You get famous
yeah,
enough, you could do that.
yeah, um, yeah. Sidechain's a hard thing because it's something that you really want to dial in for certain tracks, especially if you're doing more dance music. But there's a lot of subtlety to it that needs to be dialed in if you're changing the BPM wildly, or if you want it like to
Hmm.
hit more or less or things like that. There's the gain, the makeup gain that you've got to mess with a little bit here and there.
Yeah, I think the Ghost has, I think like a tail setting and like a depth setting. Um, and I kind of wish it had an envelope follower. That sounds nice, but
Yeah, I
uh,
mean the tail setting does the job I think really well, and I quite
yeah,
like
it
that.
does. But it's like you were saying, if you change the decay of the kick, then you have to remember, like you have to go and change the tail on the compressor as well.
Yeah, and I also ran into some happy or maybe unhappy accidents, I guess, here and there when I switched to using audio instead of CV for triggering the sidechain. And one of the interesting bits that I kind of like is when I on one of the tracks I hold the crater for like a good bar, so it's like boom, like it really. If you got a subwoofer, you're like it's gonna make you shake a bit, and it ducks all of the bass line. So if I have like like a held bass line, it like ducks that and holds it down until the kick's almost done, and it ramps that up. And if you have like the gnarliest filter setting, like you got a lot of resonance or something on that bass line, when it comes back up, it's a pretty cool like interplay between those two things. So I kind of like it. It's not great for everything, but it's what I
Hmm.
like.
Yeah,
Um,
kind of in like I guess the nice thing about using a trigger like I do is you can trigger the side chain without and like mute the actual kick,
yeah,
and so then you just get like the ducking, which
yeah,
is kind of a fun little
yes, yeah,
break kind of thing.
yes, yeah. I also quite like the sound of like pretty much exactly what you said. Like, let's say I have quarter note drums, just four to the floor, or kicks. If I mute that kick, or like, yeah, if I mute it one way or another, and I've got like a drone going, not side chained, like you get that really nice pulsy, like it's
Hmm.
just a cool vibe. Um, yeah, like you can hear the kick, but you can't hear the kick.
Right.
The,
Yeah.
the
It's like
ghost
a ghost
kick.
kick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Another question: do I only compress? Well, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to answer first? Do you compress the bass, just the bass, or the whole mix, or what?
Generally, I just compress. I think the bass, the Castor and Pollock's voice, which is generally what I'm using for bass.
Yeah,
But that's just because like my only real compressor right now is the Ghost. So I wouldn't mind getting like the muscle or something like that to like give me some more compression, but it's just
yeah,
the one compressor.
yeah. I mean, even then, like, there's still some limitations. Like, typically, I'm only compressing the bass, because I don't have a compressor per voice. Uh, I would like to sometimes compress the some of the leads a little bit, just like a really snappy compression, just so like the the kick or the snare cuts through the lead a little better. That's it. Like that's really all I want. It's just a little bit, just to get those two other things to surface a little more. But um, a lot of the times, my lead voice, especially on the Cosmo side of things, has a fair amount of resonance, and the envelope that is going to my filter is actually quite snappy. So like you get like a nice sort of transient at the beginning of each note. Um, and if I compress that, like it's sort of noticeable. So I don't
Mm,
do that. I don't compress that voice at all, and I only sometimes compress the other lead voice because that one's really flexible and I can use it for a lot of things. So sometimes like I'll flip the switch to the long, so it's a longer tail on the note, like basically multiply the time the entire envelope takes, so it's really long and the notes sort of bleed together, especially with uh, one of the Delegio or Data Bender. They sort of cordify the note a bit. And in that case, I'll probably flip on that compression switch. Yeah, it just sort of depends on the lead, but usually just the bass, and I don't always do the bass. Um, Especially on the Cosmo side of things, I don't always do it. It is sometimes fun to compress the Mega Drone too. Like that's a pretty cool sound. And I do have a second muscle on the entire mix for everything. Sort of end of chain before the DJ filter, um, and that just has some slight auto compression like kind of stuff. It's not using a trigger or anything. It's just doing just a little bit of compression there. and took me a while to hear it. Just like play with that for like 3 hours straight before I was like, oh, I understand this a little better now. Turn it back down a bit to where it sounds good to me, and then I'll never touch it again.
All right,
Can't
that's
say
what
it
I need to
makes my
do.
music better, but it's there. So, and
Right.
and any, uh, yeah. Um, I mean, I'm not like an expert at mixing, EQing sound as like the stuff that typically you would expect to do in a DAW when you're making a track, because everything that we do is so ephemeral that I don't really want to take the time to do it really. And it also feels like if you dial in the EQ just right for a track, like it's probably not going to work just that well for the next track.
Right. It is kind of like a like yeah, for like whenever you change a voice or whatever, you're gonna have to change how you're compressing and just doing like the
Yeah,
whole kind of mixing.
yeah. If I had extra room for compressors, I'd get more muscles, as many muscles as I could, and like put a compressor that's trigger based, or maybe still using the drum on like after the reverb or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly just don't use a lot of reverb. So take that, mud. Um, yeah, I will say I tried out. I always forget the name. Hold on, let me look it up. The newer Versio. So noise engineering, hearing Versio. Oh, the Versio. Yeah, I want to go there. It's the. It's like the last Lacrima. No, that's not it. Yester Versio. No, is that really it? I think it is Yester Versio. It's anyways. There's three tap delay. Uh, hold on, I have to go back. Yeah. There's three tap delay slash reverb slash wave folder combo. Um, because I really like the sound of delays and was sort of missing that on some of the stuff. And the other ones I tried, I still want to explore more. I just didn't like quite as much. And this one, like, it's a very clear three tap clocked delay minimum. You can increase the number. And then it's sort of as you're cranking one of the knobs up on the top right, which I don't remember what it is, I just know where it is. It sort of smears into reverb territory, and not just because
Oh,
it's increasing delay, but because it's actually adding reverb to it.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
and that one was really easy for me to control. Everything sort of does exactly what I expect, and then there's a wave folding aspect, which is really nice to like bring those uh, delayed sounds into wavefold territory, and I quite like that one. That's the closest I've gotten to actually like leaving a delay in my system for any period of time. Um, yeah, it's fantastic. Ruin. I mean, they're all great. Like, I actually really do love Desmo as a reverb. The problem is, like, I just, because I'm not doing any EQing or anything, I have a hard time making tracks with that in the mix where it doesn't just ultimately sound kind of muddy to me. It does sound
Yeah.
great, like with really Spartan tracks too. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. I use like a Pico DSP that I modded as my reverb, and I've noticed, yeah, it's like it's really easy for it to get, and it just like creeps up with the mud, and then like you all of a sudden you turn it down, and you're like, oh wow, there's like everything's a lot more clear all of a sudden.
yeah. I mean, I don't find myself missing it, but it's hard to. There's a lot of internal satisfaction and wow factor that comes with the delay in the right spot, especially if you're not playing anything, like you haven't hit play on your sequence or anything, and you like hit one note on your lead and you turn that reverb up and like hit the next note and maybe there's a bit of a slew or something, but like it just I don't know, it feels so cool with the right reverb. But it like fills up. I think it's because it's sort of filling up that audio spectrum a fair amount with one sound, you know.
Right, yeah. But there's a reason that like every synth demo puts delay and reverb.
Mm-hmm.
Like it sounds good.
It sounds good, especially when you're demoing the one synth. You have a lot of room to fill
Right.
up. Um, I don't like those demos a ton. Like actually, I think the demos that I like the most are probably Div Kids because the beginning of the video is
Mm,
like shortcuts of all of the places he's going to go in the video,
mhm.
which includes such a wide range of use of the module where I get a pretty good impression of it, and then I can like jump around or just listen to the whole thing versus just like a long patch with reverb or something just to make the
Right.
module sound good.
Yeah. I've seen a few recently where they'll like demo the module by like using it to make a song or like using it in in use really. Kind of like
Yeah,
DivKid does. But
yeah,
those are my favorite.
yep. Those are my favorite, with the exception of filters, because with filters, I'm totally okay with somebody going like, I wish
Wiggle,
they
wiggle,
would go
wiggle.
like an octave lower typically because they're usually like in a mid
Mm,
range, and I want them to be in a low
mm,
range so I can really understand the filter. But you know, here's the filter at 10% with no resonance. Here's it at 20%. Here's it, like they go through all of that.
right.
Here's it with 20% resonance, and then they slowly like I'm okay with those for filters because then I get a pretty decent sense of how it's going to react. Um, if they go high enough with the resonance. They rarely do because when you get too high with the resonance, you get enough of that like you know
That like
dog
feedback whine.
whistly like
Yeah.
whine, yeah, that like hurts everybody's soul a little bit. Um, but if you keep the filter cut off pretty low, that gets into just beautiful resonant sub territory, and I'd love to hear more
Mm,
of that kind of stuff. Um, just don't crank it all the way. Like once it gets to the bad sounds,
right.
just go back to the left and turn up the resonance
And
even more, and like
there
repeat.
you go.
Um, yeah. Pure Aruna is pretty dang good. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, uh, enough like noise engineering complimenting. I think we've gone for well over an hour. So let's cut it off here. Um, and with that, let's listen to Yester Versio. Yester, is that? Did I already forget the name of it?
That I believe was that was the correct one.
Yes, sweet. First try.
That was
All
the
right.
delay, right?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Requiem. I really
Yeah. Thanks for
appreciate
having
you
me.
popping in. Yeah, everybody, let me know if you want to be on the next one. Actually, the next one's going to be really fun because it's just unmade recap highlight reel, so you don't have to have any attention on you if you don't want. All right. Turn all that off and switch.